Hello and welcome to the MeasurePod by MeasureLab, the podcast dedicated to the ever-changing world of data and analytics, with your hosts Dara Fitzgerald and Matthew Hewson. Between them, they've spent more years than they'd like to admit wrestling with dashboards, data quality, and the occasional Google curveball. So join us as we share stories about how analytics really works today and where it might be headed tomorrow. Let's get into it.
Hello and welcome back to the MeasurePod. I'm Dara. I'm joined by Matthew. How are you today, Matthew?
I'm good, thank you. Yeah, nice to see that you remember your own name now, getting back into the swing of things.
Yeah, you said that last week. Come on.
No, I didn't.
I once, who doesn't occasionally forget who they are?
That's true. That is true. Not often happens sober, but yeah.
Who says I'm sober?
Well, no, yeah, you got to have fun somewhere. Podcast
Exactly.
drinking.
Yeah, exactly.
But I'm all right.
Good.
I'm good. How are you?
I'm also all right. Thanks for asking.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, that's enough for today. See you next time, everyone. Yes, no, I'm good. I'm good. I'm looking forward to this one. I think it's going to be interesting. We probably always say this before we start recording, but I thought I'd say it as we've hit record this time. This one's going to be interesting.
Yeah.
It's going to be a wild ride.
It's going to be good or terrible. Nowhere in between.
Listen, like most things in life, they're either good or terrible. Who likes the in between?
Nobody.
Not interested.
Nobody. If I find it's feeling a bit mediocre, I'm just going to tank it, just to pull it down.
Exactly. We will kick off with I've done a lot of legwork on the news this week, as usual. Let's be honest, as usual. But I'll let you steal my thunder. I'll let you have the credit. I'll let you pretend you've done all the research on the news this week.
Thank you for that. We normally say this flippantly and as a joke, but it has been a little bit slower. It's hard this because we're technically recording this like probably what
In the
3
future,
weeks before we're actually going to release it.
or in the past.
Yeah, in the past. I'm going to say it's been a bit of a slow news week, but that is from the 28th of May to today, the 8th of June. By the time this comes out, Mythos is probably out and self-recursive is probably just Terminators wandering the streets and mowing people down. I don't know, but
People are going to be like, what is this guy talking about? Slow news week. The world as we know it has been turned upside down, and he calls that slow. God, he's hard to please, this fella.
well, who knows? I will maybe if there's something absolutely catastrophic happens, I might have to just jump in and do an addendum to this news item, this news section. But here's what I have as I know it.
Maybe this will be replaced by a fully AI voiced podcast instead, and it'll just be agent to agent.
Yeah,
because
Who
we'll all be locked up in little tiny boxes.
in our own little AI spaces.
Wow, we're 5 minutes into the episode, not even, and already we've gone to humans being kept in tiny boxes.
Dystopia.
Yeah.
Blame Hollywood. It's right. News. So, there's a few pieces. Nothing major, I don't think. But so there's this Anthropic's released another one of its. Is it marketing? Is it truth? Kind of. Blog posts, which is around recursive self-improvement, and essentially what they're saying is that they've noticed a very significant trend to the point where their engineers now internally are producing 8 times as much code as they were at the end of last year, and this code is now actively going into improving the models. They're also noticing at the end of last year they were the quality of the code was that or just below some of their top engineers, and they're anticipating very shortly to the middle of this year that the code quality is going to be on a par or better. In fact, it might have said it's on a par currently, but they expect it to start exceeding their engineers' standard outputs in the middle of this year.
I'm probably not supposed to be. You were on a roll there. I probably just completely ruined that, but it's too late now. It started. I want to know, how do they assess that? Because what does what do they mean by because there's the like semantically correct and whatever, and but it surely it depends partly as well on what context it has and the prompting. I'd love to know how they judge that. What does that mean exactly?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, my guess would be it's things like, I don't know, efficiency, the need for intervention, things like that. That like if it's able to just one shot produce efficient, secure code, and post review comes out as good and without any need for change. Maybe, I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because it's like, do you see what I'm getting at? Like, surely already it's capable of being as good as any developer if it gets the right context and the right. Because it's with some of the stuff, it's obviously objective, like it's either right or it's wrong, and then other stuff maybe less so. But if they're just doing it purely based on something like efficiency or security or whatever, then you'd think if it was prompted in the right way, like one of those developers using it to produce code is probably better than one of those developers producing code on their own, you would think.
Certainly more productive.
More productive, yeah, maybe not better. That's why I'm curious what better means in this case.
I think probably the entire, again, it's whether this is, there's a bit of the old marketing spin that Anthropic is pretty good at, sort of the we're helping humanity, but also we're at the same time bigging up what we are able to do and produce hand in hand. They're the masters of that. But it's something that the entirety of software engineering is probably wrestling with, like what is a good engineer at this point? Like somebody could be technically brilliant, but they refuse or can't gel with working with these LLMs, so they are technically now worse than somebody who is below their theoretical skill level because they, for whatever reason, they can't produce as much. Ultimately, it comes down to the fundamentals of security and scalability and all of those kinds of things. But the buck stops with being able to produce features and profitability, and if you can ship more with these things, that's the way, the least friction. That's the way it's going to go, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah.
As part of that, towards the end of that post, they talk about, they essentially call for a slowdown on the production of frontier models because they're worried right now that, they're kind of theorizing that they're going to get towards this recursive self-improvement in short order, but they are not convinced that they or the world are ready for a place where AIs are able to improve themselves in that way. They call for a slowdown. Being cynical, I don't think that's going to happen in any way, shape, or form. And maybe they know that as well, which is why they can confidently say it out loud. But
it makes me think of the most bizarre connection or parallel, whatever. I don't know what it is. Have you seen the Arnie documentary, Pumping Iron?
No. I can't wait to see where this goes.
This is the point we lose all our listeners. They're like, right, he's finally completely lost it. So there's a moment. This really happens. There's a moment in one of the Mr. Olympias that Arnie won. Lou Ferrigno, Lou Ferrigno, who was the actual Incredible Hulk on the TV series back in the in the 80s. So he was competing against Arnie, and the two of them, the judges couldn't decide who was the winner. So Arnie said, yeah, exactly. Yeah. So Arnie said, let's just walk off stage. Let's not give them let's not like lower ourselves. Let's just walk off the stage. And then as they went to walk off, Arnie turned around and went, I'm the winner. And he basically claimed the prize. And it just strikes me that it's a bit like that they're maybe saying, look, let's all stop. And then if anyone else actually listens to them, they'll just say, haha, we've invented AGI.
Yeah. And they know they can't. Yeah. They know they can't. Yeah. It seems like just a clever thing just to put out there.
I think they've been inspired by Arnie. I think they're following in his footsteps. They thought, that's a good idea. Let's do that.
Yeah. Who's the muscliest foundation lab? We're the muscliest guys, but if you want to start, whatever. Yeah, very interesting link there.
Yeah. I thought you'd like that one. Yeah.
Very human. Don't think AI could come up with that one yet.
Definitely not. No, definitely not.
As well, and this links to the second news item, I suppose. They might be saying this stuff because they are in the throes of raising their IPO, which currently would put them on track to be the most valuable startup ever, because it looks as though the valuation currently is hovering around $1 trillion. 965 billion is the last one I saw.
Let's just call it $1 trillion, shall we?
Let's call it an easy trill.
Round it up to the trill.
Yeah, and there's a lot of stuff going around about what this does just generally to the stock market and index funds and all this sort of stuff when you're talking about these kinds of silly money things appearing. But yeah, that they're going for, and that would put them past OpenAI's valuation, I believe, the current IPO valuation, which is interesting in of itself, which we might talk about a bit in the OpenAI section. Well, spoilers, don't know if I said about that yet, but anyway. Yeah, so bonkers money.
Basically. Pretty mad, isn't it? Pretty mad. And, this will be the point, I guess, that if they have any skeletons in the closet, they'll come out, or if there's any tensions brewing, then, this will expose them. It's going to be an interesting point in time for them, but just crazy numbers and crazy growth and everything else. It's mad.
Yeah, I think we've hinted at this on a couple of episodes, but never had any numbers to hand, because that's what we do.
Yeah, we don't like numbers, really, do we?
No, but Anthropic has recently passed OpenAI in annualized run rate revenue. They're now up to 30 billion, and they've passed OpenAI, who are at 24 billion. And the change, I think, let me just find the number exactly, but it was something silly like, so the numbers, one of the craziest numbers was that they went from 14 billion to 30 billion, as in they exponentially increased their annualized run rate in 8 weeks. It is literally just a vertical line, and they look to be spending a lot less training than OpenAI are, quite significantly less training their models, and less just generally serving up the models, which is also interesting. I was thinking about this actually, because OpenAI have a ton more monthly or daily users, but that they've kind of got the sort of general person ChatGPT market sewed up. Yeah, which is why they're so much more reliant on getting this ad stuff to work, because they need to get revenue from that. They've got all these free tiers in which they're serving up compute to all of these people for nothing and trying to hope that they'll drop into that day-to-day, how do I make a cake? Whereas Anthropic is really concentrated on Claude code and co-work and delivering value there. They're not, like, people don't tend to use Claude for how you bake a cake. It's much more about doing. So they have less hangers-on, as it were. If you probably a bit flippant to call those hangers on, but they just deliver value to a smaller subset, and that, it seems to be working unbelievably for them.
It really is unbelievable. I mean, that growth trajectory is just insane. And you definitely wouldn't want to be. I mean, would you want to be in a position in OpenAI? I'm just not sure I would. Like, they've had to roll out ads, almost in desperation, and Anthropic are able to now say, we're not going to do that. And Google at the moment don't have to. Maybe Google will go that way if their own ad business starts to decline, but they've got all the cloud revenue then as well. So
yeah, these two don't really have that.
No, OpenAI are the only ones who really had to think shit our backs against the wall. We need to get some revenue in.
Yeah. I mean, they're still, their annualized, their ARR was 24 billion to Anthropic's 30.
Chump change, really, isn't it?
But yeah, neither of them are profitable. It's worth pointing out and saying.
Doesn't matter. Companies don't need to be profitable, do they?
Well, apparently not. I mean, I think Uber was unprofitable until like 2 years ago. But yeah, I think that the idea is that the intelligence, the cost per intelligence unit is reducing, and once they sort of hit a critical mass where they're getting lots of use out of it, that reduces down, and then the sort of theory is sort of 2029, where those two things pass. This is just a drip in the ocean. Who cares? Because it's just going to be a license to print trillions of pounds for any investor. So
if money means anything at that point.
Well, yes, yeah, true. But who knows? You're going back into dystopian again.
And that's just where I live. My mind is a dark place.
Yes, yeah, I've always said that. Yeah, and so to move off Anthropic then for a minute, Microsoft have brought out a few models themselves.
Have they now?
Yes, they've brought out to sort of wean themselves off OpenAI a touch. They brought out a couple of models. I've got the name for them somewhere. I have to cut this silence. They've released MAI Code 1 Flash.
Oh, great name.
Yeah, which takes written descriptions from people and spits out source code for applications and websites. So yes, they're clearly trying to dip their toe in somewhere. They have a lot of data centers, don't they? You would assume that they've got some compute behind them.
Yeah, they do. I've just gone and ended up on playground.microsoft.ai. It looks like it's got an image generator, a transcription thing for audio to text, and a voice one. I'm not seeing the other one. Maybe that's not fully available to us yet.
No, probably not. Anthropic are the only good ones who give us access to everything when at the same time as everyone else. But again, we'll answer that later.
Yeah, well, indeed. Yeah, indeed. But that's interesting, yeah. And so what? I wonder what. How that's going to play out then, because they're still, like you said, weaning themselves off. But if I missed a piece of news, are they pulling out of OpenAI, or are they?
I don't think so. I know that there's some. Obviously, when they first invested in OpenAI, they were not for profit, and now they've got this for profit arm. There's some funkiness was going on with the definition of AGI, because that was technically some point at which, I don't know, OpenAI could separate, or I can't remember exactly the terms of it. So I don't know if there has been a bit of friction. And
yeah, it's just interesting that, like, if there is friction, and then bringing out a model is kind of like really showing your hand, isn't it?
Yeah. But again, they kind of position themselves a little bit like Google, I suppose, because I think a lot of OpenAI's models are probably trained on Microsoft data centers, because that's what the initial sort of part of the initial partnership was about, was giving them the compute resource to compete with like DeepMind, who had Google's cloud to train things. But yeah, I don't want to do a Microsoft version of our.
Don't care.
I don't care. Moving on. But yeah, I can't ever see myself using like Microsoft models. It just feels too gross.
It is a bit gross. Yeah. Sorry, Bill.
Yeah, sorry, Bill. He went to Epstein Island today. Maybe let's stick to tech. Let's not go down that way. Moving on swiftly. Gemini 3.5 Pro is supposed to come out in June. May well have come out by the time this goes out.
It's June now.
I know. Some point in June. I think last time we talked about, I said there was like a thinking, but I think it was the 3.5 Flash or Lite thinking. There is a Pro version due to come out, and it's supposed to come out at some point in June. And finally, Claude Mythos, I think, appeared briefly for some in the wild as like a UI item. Didn't do anything, but it just
That's how it starts.
Yeah, so it appeared as like a Mythos preview, appeared in a couple of places and then disappeared. They have recently expanded out the Project Glasswing to more companies.
Okay, so it's heading there.
Yeah, but I know they mentioned in the 4.8 release that they were working on a new tier of model that would be coming out relatively soon. So you got to assume it's some version of Mythos that's going to sit above Opus soon.
Very interesting.
Yeah, that's the news.
That is the news. Except this placeholder, which we're going to fill with all of the big things that happen between now and when this gets released.
Yeah. And if we're still saying this, then nothing happened, which I doubt.
That's unlikely, isn't it? Yeah. Okay, so on to our topic. So we've been promising this for a while. A bit of an OpenAI deep dive, because we've covered Anthropic a lot. We've covered Google quite a bit. To be fair, on the Google front, we haven't dug into Gemini a huge amount. It's come up in the news a lot, and we've done episodes around kind of Google's position and things. But I need to be careful, or I'm going to talk us into doing a Gemini. This is how we get into this trouble in the first place. Anyway, let's see, park that thought. But we figured we'd do a bit of an exploration of OpenAI, because neither of us have really used. We obviously both started out on ChatGPT, but then fairly early on moved across to Claude, and I've been, with a bit of Gemini thrown in there, sprinkled in there along the way as well. But things have changed a lot at OpenAI since we last were properly using their tools, so we figured we'd spend a bit of time exploring them and give our thoughts.
Yeah, I think there's a bit to say about the context of like where they sit amongst the others as well. Like, what they're that we've kind of just briefly touched on in the news section, I suppose. But like how they compare to what the apps and what they're trying to deliver and what they're trying to push is all really interesting as well. So the scene setting as well, I guess.
Yeah. So where do we start?
I don't know.
I mean, well, just to kind of, this isn't necessarily the main starting point, but you said there about where they kind of sit and where they're positioned, and obviously there are, even like we talked about earlier, and this has come up a few times before, where ChatGPT has kind of got the bigger user base, but it's a lot of what did you had some terrible, horrible, mean term for them, hangers on or something. I would never say such a thing, but you've said it now, so that's the definitions. That's what we're going to go with. But it's all on you. But yeah, no, they've got kind of more of your kind of general kind of mass market usage, whereas Claude has for a while now been kind of a lot of kind of focus on the coding aspect. But my kind of very initial take when I started using ChatGPT, like again now for this episode, and Codex, was they're really similar. Even the way they're designed and everything, I was finding it, sometimes I had to double check which one I was in because I had them both open. I mean, they're not identical, but just, when you're kind of a bit fixated on what it is you're doing.
Yeah.
They're generally speaking, they're quite similar. Like even Codex now is very much like co-work, whereas it wasn't up until recently. I think it was just a CLI. And now the desktop app is very co-worky. So a lot of the like where you expect to find things, they're in similar places and they work in a vaguely similar way. Obviously, performance is different. We're going to go into that. But just as a general kind of, what you might use them for, I found a lot of parity. For my kind of use cases, I kind of thought, I could probably interchange between them without noticing too much of a real practical difference.
Yeah, I guess the main difference I noticed was that it did feel a little less mature, the Codex app, compared to Anthropic, because Anthropic have kind of combined their three verticals into that single application now. So you've got the chat, you've got the co-work functionality where it's connecting to all of your apps, etc., and then you've got code in there where you can run cloud versions of Claude Code and things, and it all kind of sits in the same interface. What I was finding with well, correct me if I'm wrong here, because I didn't end up using the Codex app a lot for reasons we'll come on to, but it felt like it was very much just like the co-work equivalent as an app. It was a standalone app.
No, I found the same, and it's really weird because I had the ChatGPT app and I had the Codex app, but a lot of I was doing coding in the CLI, so I was like, well, hang on, why have I got this Codex app and a ChatGPT app? Why are they two separate apps?
And I wonder if that's because of what we talked about, that they've got so many hangers on. They've got so many people who aren't going to be interested in running code or even they're just people who just want the chat interface and apps in the chat interface and booking hotels and doing all those sorts of things, that if they pull all of it together, it starts to sort of conflate things a little and make it confusing for their huge user base.
Yeah, you're probably right. Yeah, no, I think you're probably right, because it's a bit like with within the Claude desktop app, you wonder, like, sometimes why would you use chat, but then you might use chat to do deep research, but that's about the only thing chat really does now that you can't do in cowork. And then on the OpenAI side, you've got that same thing, but you've got it across two different apps. So you're right. Probably for most people, they might just download ChatGPT and they'll use that, and that's fine, or they'll just do it in the browser. But yeah, when you're kind of trying to use all of it, you end up thinking, hang on, why am I? But like the terminal open, for which you don't have to do. You could obviously do the coding in Codex, the desktop app, but I was choosing to do it in the CLI. So then you've got three different apps open, and you're thinking, surely there's an easier way. Surely there's an easier way than this. But yeah, maybe it is just, as you said, that they're just aiming them at different parts of their target audience.
Yeah, you'd have to say so they roughly have the same set of things, right? So they have the chat, they have the relatively new Codex co-working type equivalent, and then they have the CLI coding stuff going on. And the way I kind of felt it was when I was in, say, the chat app. I actually used chat through the web UI. Actually, I didn't even think about downloading the app, but I was using it through the web UI. That feels more mature than just Claude's chat. Like, it feels like that. You can tell they've been there for longer and they've spent more time on that piece. Whereas the other two, the co-work and the CLI, I still felt that Anthropic are far ahead on those two other pieces, like Claude Code and the co-work stuff. Anthropic still has a thing, and I noticed. I went and I was on a VPN. I forgot I was on a VPN for the US because I was trying to use Gemini Omni to create silly videos, and I went into ChatGPT and then I was asking it something, and it's popped up an app, and like it was showing me a map that I could interact with and stuff. I was like, oh right, yeah, I forgot about these apps. But then I looked into it, and that's only because I was on the US. It still doesn't exist in the UK, and that was like, oh, that's terrible, because that was I was like, go ChatGPT. But yeah, that would be my assessment.
And that was interesting, actually, what you said there, because the geo-restrictions was one part of something that I found really kind of both frustrating and kind of amusing, where as well as doing, so we'll get into this, but we both went and kind of did some we picked an example of something and we went and kind of worked on it to compare. But alongside that, I just wanted a simple list of what each of them does. So a list of what they both offer that has some equivalence. So, features that, even if they're not the same, that you can kind of vaguely do the same thing across both of them, and then where each of them have something that the other one doesn't. And using AI to get that list is an area where AI still has some work to do, because I got each of them, I gave each of them a fair shot and said, look, do this for me, but knowing that they'd be a little bit biased. But it wasn't even just that they were biased, they just had their weaknesses in terms of getting real up-to-date information. And then I thought I'd use Gemini as the arbitrator. And Gemini even confidently said, oh, you're right to give this job to me, because I'm not a horse in the race. And, I've got the most up-to-date real-time information, yada, yada, yada. So it built me the list, and I passed it back through the other two, and they ripped it apart.
Maybe that's in the training data, just to disparage.
Yeah, I think so. But I ended up in this like never ending. I had to just stop eventually. I think I was on like round 6 of passing the feedback back round. And all I wanted was a complete. I should have just manually done it. I just wanted a list of like what they do. But anyway, the point within the point was part of that is because of the geo-restrictions. So it was including things saying they're available, and then actually they're available to some people but not to others. So it's kind of hard. It's a bit of a moving target trying to find out what, and because they're releasing stuff left, right, and center and deprecating stuff. So one of the features that came up, I don't know if I can even remember what it was now. Canvas, I think it was called, in ChatGPT. But they got rid of it. It's just rolled into something else now. So there was things showing up in the list that don't exist as of last month. There was things that weren't showing up that do exist now. And then things that are either partially available or whatever, and then mix in your little sprinkling of hallucination as well. It's actually quite hard to get this definitive list, so I gave up on that at the end.
Yeah, I think that is. I need to be careful not to just wang on about Anthropic the whole time. But it is one thing that, and I think we've commented on this in the past, but Google and OpenAI are terrible for just US-based releases. Or OpenAI is a very US-based release. Gemini does the same thing, but Google goes one step further and announces things 3 years before they come out, and then by the time it actually reaches, it looks completely different. It's called something different. Anthropic, as far as I can tell, most announcements happen, and then I open Anthropic and it's there and I can use it. I've never quite felt the sort of US, UK, or Europe or rest of the world divide.
No, and how, if they can do it, surely like it's not going to be there can't be a good enough reason why the others don't if Anthropic are able to do it.
No. But yeah, so I agree. It is difficult to know the parity, and it's difficult with, like, I was finding. Maybe we'll come on to this. When we come to the project. But when I was using various features and things in the CLI, I was struggling they've all named slightly different things, but they do similar things, and it was hard to sort of navigate my way around, like, how do I get it to do this? How do I get it to do this muscle memory I've got in Claude Code in here? Which in some cases I couldn't do.
No, exactly. And that plus trying to match like equivalent, like the model and the settings across them as well. It's, trying to make sure that you're using a comparable model and a comparable kind of thinking level, reasoning level, and then how autonomous it is as well. So I was trying to step my way through quite carefully, thinking I don't want to bias this by accidentally giving one of them an advantage over the other, just because I'm not so used to using OpenAI. Also, normally when you're using Claude, you're not necessarily thinking. You're thinking about maybe things like that in terms of like what output you want, but you're not thinking about it in terms of comparing it to anything else. So I was trying to just make sure that I was doing everything fairly between the two of them.
Yeah, I still have one good place to start. We've already started. I don't know what I'm on about, but one good place to continue starting. How did you find the sort of downloading, setting up, and starting work with Codex, like the application?
Will it annoy you if I say it was really easy and smooth and I had no errors or anything like you did? It just, everything just seemed to work okay for me.
Mine was terrible. So I downloaded it. It offered up one interesting thing. Another interesting thing is this migration stuff that's built into it, and I'm sure there's other migration assistants in the others as well. But when I opened it for the first time, it was like, do you want to migrate from Anthropic or wherever? And obviously, well, I said yes, but it didn't work. It brought in all these chats that said like it had no idea about them. I was hoping it would be in memory and things like that, because one of the things I found later was I was able to get better answers because Claude I've just got a load of memory. I don't even know where it's stored. It's just all over the place. It seems to know these things. So I was getting better answers in that way. So yeah, that happened, and it didn't really properly migrate. And then I don't know if this was because of that or just some particular version of the app I had, but it was incredibly unstable. It crashed continuously. I think it had crashed about 8 times in a few hours by the time I gave up and just started using the CLI Codex instead of bothering with that app. So the actual Codex application itself for me was unusable.
So I didn't do any coding through the Codex app. I just did some conversations. I did the coding through the CLI just in the terminal.
Yeah.
So maybe I would have hit more issues if I'd tried to do.
Maybe. There's something I was clearly triggering that you weren't, that was just causing it to just fall over every 5 seconds.
No, I had no.
It is a newer app in comparison to Claude Desktop, but still.
Yeah, no, I had no major hiccups technically on either side. But then I already had Claude set up, but it behaved itself, which it doesn't always, and the OpenAI stuff worked okay as well.
Lucky you.
Yeah, I'm not usually so lucky with these things. My swearing at it was kind of quite minimal, actually. I had to go and swear at the wall just to get the.
Well, maybe we should have at the end of this podcast, we'll have a stick or twist, and you got to decide whether you're going to stick with Anthropic or if you're going to twist to OpenAI.
Well, that could be interesting.
Yeah,
could be interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So so how did you find Codex? Should we go into little projects we played with?
Yeah. So I made life a bit difficult for myself, to be honest. I think I probably spent all the time doing the test and not a lot of time processing the result and preparing to talk about the result. I've got like a big long document here that I'm gonna probably have to try and smoothly scan through and pick bits out. But what I decided to do, I thought I'd pick something non-work related to kind of partly. This is maybe overthinking it, but partly to keep, because I was going to use my work Claude account, I didn't want it to have any context that might be useful for it from previous conversations. So I decided to build there's loads of these online, but I decided to build a running race predictor. So like to predict the time that you'd run in a race based on a previous race results and training leading up to the race. So useful for me, something that I would use personally. And I wanted to have minimal involvement. So the way I did it, I did 2 deep research pieces, one with ChatGPT and one with Claude. And I fed the same prompt into both. I said, this is what I want to build. This is all I'm going to give you is this prompt. You need to research all the available best practice methods for predicting race times. There's a bunch of them out there already, and it's like, go and research them and bake that logic that you think is best into a standalone web app. And the output of the deep research needed to be the brief for the coding agent. And then I was going to feed both of them. So I fed that prompt into ChatGPT and into Claude. So I got 2 outputs. And I fed each of those outputs into both Claude Code and Codex, but blind. So they didn't know which one had produced which brief. So I ended up with 4 running apps. And then those 4 were assessed based on like accuracy, quality of the code. And actually this is interesting because this links back to what we talked about earlier about what does better code mean, because I had them assessed then by Gemini, and it looked at the prediction, it looked at the quality of the code, and it looked at a bunch of other things as well, and then some kind of usability things. Should I move on to the results, or should we do the big reveal at the end, or should I just say should I just jump straight to the results now?
Yeah.
So the deep research was significantly better with ChatGPT.
Yes.
And the brief that it produced from that to go into the coding agent was better.
Might as well mention because I did a test comparing deep research on both, And I found, so I have some headline stats for mine. Exactly the same prompt into both. The time ChatGPT took to do the deep research was 29 minutes versus Claude. Claude did it for 6 to 7 minutes. The searches ChatGPT did was like 530 odd versus it didn't have a direct comparison of searches. Claude called it sources, which I assume is the same thing, which was 230 sources.
My searches and sources were more similar to each other, but the time is very similar. So 32 minutes for ChatGPT and 9 minutes 59 seconds for Claude. But Claude's sources was 245 and ChatGPT's searches was 277. So they were closer on that. But the time it took ChatGPT, and I was annoyed at first because I was saying, oh, that's a black mark against ChatGPT, but the quality of it was, and this was judged in my case, I don't know how you did it, I got them to judge. So I got a fresh Claude session and a fresh ChatGPT session and fed just the output of the research back in. And then I also fed it into Gemini. And all three of them said ChatGPT's was better. So even Claude.
Mine was corrupted, essentially, because I had it do some deep research on something I was looking up around scene. So the output, I fed both of the outputs into Gemini. But the output for Claude was elevated because it knew what scene was, which was part of what I was thinking of. Like, there's a little bit of a walled garden there. It's got so much context tucked away on things. It knew what scene was. It knew what kind of application and everything, and it kind of fed that into its context of what it was doing the research. Whereas ChatGPT went more generic because it didn't know what scene was. So essentially Gemini, she said, this is a lot more thorough and sort of as a standalone piece of research, a lot better for ChatGPT. But the most useful piece of research probably to you right now is the Claude one because it knew what scene was. In the end, I combined them both together and used that. But yeah, I kind of corrupted it a touch.
That makes sense. That's why I went with the running app thing, because I was like, I'll keep anything. I'll try my best to keep it unbiased. Obviously, it's hard because there's lots of other places where it could swing one way or the other. But yeah, it seems like ChatGPT's deep research is just unanimously better.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to look at Gemini's as well, because I remember finding Gemini's deep research really good in comparison to OpenAI's at one point. I think I shared 2 documents internally saying, like, this was ChatGPT's, this was OpenAI's. ChatGPT's and Gemini's was much more thorough. So you can imagine, like, the might of Google in their search. They would have some pretty good clout behind it. So I'd be interested to compare those two.
Well, one thing I noticed with Gemini, because I haven't used Gemini much lately, is it was unbelievably quick. Like, when I was passing in, at one occasion I had to actually say, have you actually checked this? Have you verified this? Because you just spat this answer out. It was when I was getting it to do the list of features, which actually turned out not to be entirely right anyway. But it was saying, yes, I pulled all this information in real time from the interwebs. But it was blindingly quick. I couldn't believe how quick its response was.
Yeah, I mean, I think their default model is that 3.5 flash now. So I bet that is quick to respond.
I'm not sure I think I was on thinking. Maybe I wasn't. No, I was on flash. Yeah. So maybe that's why. So then I fed those 2 briefs as they were into Claude Code and into Codex, and had them both make 2 apps. So as I said, I ended up with 4. And then the deep research was undeniably better from ChatGPT, but the coding was unanimously better for Claude Code. But the reason, or partly why I was saying it's interesting about what does better mean, because the most accurate predictor. So what I did with it is I then took historical data of mine and fed it in to get it to do a prediction of a real race that I'd done. And the most accurate one was the ChatGPT deep research and the ChatGPT coding agent. but the code wasn't as good. And Gemini was judging it based on, I mean, I don't have the detail of exactly what, but like it was judging it based on quality of code. And I don't know, again, I don't know what, I didn't get time to dig into exactly what measures it looked at or, you know, how it defined good quality code. But Gemini and Claude and Chat, because again, for all of this, I fed it through all of them anyway. And I used Gemini as the kind of official judge, but I was curious to see what the others would think as well. And all three of them thought that Claude Code's code was better, but it wasn't the most accurate predictor, which was kind of the point of the app. So I thought that was interesting. Like to me, that like, but maybe this is me because I'm thinking more of the output and not of the, you know, like the line by line quality of the code. But to me, I would say the winner, quote unquote, would be the one that did the best job.
Yeah, I guess there's a lot of aspects. There's a lot of aspects to an app as well. As I suppose it could get the right prediction, but then have a giant glaring security hole in the middle of it that gives everyone,
which would be bad. Yeah.
Yeah. There's like the visual aspect and UI and all those sorts of things that would need to be considered as well, right? But
yeah.
Is it? Exactly. I mean, on the model, I think ultimately GPT 5.5 I found to be a good model. Like it felt,
a good model.
It didn't feel like it was like massively behind anything else. It felt pretty much on parity with the experience I've been having with 4.8. It didn't feel like I was taking a step down, and it didn't feel like I was taking a giant leap up. But it felt good. It felt right. So
yeah, comparable. Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
So I guess the only difference there that you're experiencing is in the code quality is from the chops of Claude Code, right? Like how much more mature that is as a product compared to 5.5. Interestingly, while we're on the model, when I was doing some research, and this might be wrong, but because I poked at this.
Bit of salt.
Bit of salt in there.
Yeah, about time we sprinkled some salt in this episode.
5.5 was apparently their first rebuilt model since 4.5. As in retrained model.
Oh.
Which would throw our points.
It would, yeah. It would out the window, yeah.
It apparently rebuilt for agents, with agent being the focus, agentic workloads being the focus. I've not been able to find a reliable, I don't know where it got that from. It could be hallucinated, but I felt we hadn't been salty enough, so I'm chucking it out there anyway.
Yeah. Let's just say it's true, yeah. So something I don't know if you had this, something I had, and I did try and match them. So I don't know if this was something in the settings. So I couldn't get, I probably could have stuck at it, but I couldn't immediately get ChatGPT to go into dangerous mode or whatever. It was saying something like it couldn't do it for whatever, and I said, okay, fine, I'll do it in auto edit mode or whatever that one was called, the kind of standard one. And I did the same for Claude and Codex. And one of the things that I just observed was Claude asked me, it's called an intervention or something, but there is a technical word, isn't there, when it asks you for permission. It's not asking you to like reply, but it's asking you to approve something. And it asked me 6 times for the Claude brief, and so these are both for Claude doing the work, but it asked me 6 times on the Claude generated brief, and it asked me 5 times on the ChatGPT generated brief. And Codex asked me 0 times for both briefs. It just did it and came back and said it's done now, which I thought was interesting. I don't know what it means or why, but I found as well, this is not thoroughly tested, but even when I was using Codex as like a co-work equivalent, or even just chatting with ChatGPT, I felt like it was being a little more proactive and not trying to come back and check things with me compared to Claude. It was kind of, you could see it figuring things out. It was like, oh, the thing he asked, I don't have access to that, but I could look somewhere else. And it was going and actually trying to figure things out. Whereas Claude by default is trying to say, oh, you didn't mount that folder. And then sometimes even you have to say, well, ask me for permission for it then, and I'll give it to you, and then it will do it. But ChatGPT just seemed a little bit more fluid in that respect, which is not necessarily a good or a bad thing. Because obviously you might want to give it permission to things again, but it just seemed a little bit more willing to go the extra mile without checking in on everything with me.
I think it feels more convenient, but it feels like the harms may outweigh the convenience of it, because especially if it's just going and doing things and looking in folders without checking. And maybe this comes from Anthropic's safety bent, that they are apparently responsible AI builders, and they bake that stuff in more. But what I found, well, maybe have you is that a wrap up on your coding experiment, or do you have any other?
Loads more to tell you.
Well, let me tell you about my coding thing, because it fits nicely into that bit. I didn't do a comparison. I just used Codex CLI to build out a new app. So I started off with like a bit of a conversation and brief, just coming up with an idea, because I didn't really have one at the time. Something relatively relevant to what we do. So I was looking at this sort of a tag management and things like this, and sort of saying like, what how does that work in the modern era? What is that an old solution looking for trying to adapt to a new problem? If you had to build it today from scratch, how would you do it? And I find that conversational aspect pretty good. Like it was putting forward suggestions. It was pushing back a couple of times, saying I wouldn't really go in that direction and I'd go in that way. So it felt like it did try to pull back on the sycophancy of it a touch in places, and it felt quite a good brainstorming partner. And then I started to build out this. It's essentially a bot and LLM analytics platform. So it just concentrates on the bot and LLM traffic your site gets and how you can improve that, because that's the future people who are going to be using your website. That was the idea anyway. And yeah, like what it produced was good in the end, and it was able to go off and create things autonomously. But ultimately I found it struggled, or I couldn't get it to kind of go long horizon in the same way that I could with Claude. I felt like, especially with auto mode now in Claude, like I can pretty much walk away and be confident that it's just working along in the background. And I found it harder to do sort of long horizon tasks with Codex. And I know there are, like, you can push it into sort of modes that will get it to like a dangerous mode. But there's a critical difference between Claude's auto mode and dangerous mode for these things. And Claude's auto mode passes off decisions to a sonnet model to say, I want to do this. Do you think I'm okay to do this? And then that's assessed. And then if it's okay, it continues working through its process. So it kind of has an arbiter that it's doing things. And when that pushes back and says, no, you can't do that, that's when it comes back to you, which is few and far between. With dangerous mode, it's just like, just do whatever you want. Don't check, just go and do whatever. So I found, like, I still find, and I felt this today when I was back using Claude Code again, like I set it to task to create, to review an issue in GitHub, and to come up with a plan of action and to assess a few things. And that went off, that used Ultra, and it went off and span up like 16 agents and ran for an hour in the background, just ran away and came back with this plan and all of this inputs. I struggled to get it working that way in ChatGPT, and maybe I wouldn't have cared as much, but very recently I've started to move more and more into this sort of autonomous handoff way of working, and it felt really jarring to have to keep going and clicking yes, even if it was only like a handful of times. It's like you come back, you're like, yeah. So it felt like Anthropic is further along in that long horizon agentic capability compared to ChatGPT, but it might be some settings that I couldn't quite figure out or find. I couldn't find any equivalents of auto mode like the handoff checker that exists in Claude. But some things I did find and use was like the goals. I had to play with them, so it was building out this model for identifying bot traffic and coming back asking me all the time. In the end, I said I set it a goal to review, improve, and sort of get the identification model and algorithm as good as it could. So it kind of looped over those things a little while and returned something to me. Similar to loops, I think, in Claude. I think they're the same thing called different things, but it did a pretty good job of that. And ultimately what it output was like the UI. I didn't do like a big design file. I got it to just create a UI. It came up with the concept of what's it called? Actors, like human actors, LLM actors, bot actors. It came up with this whole concept for the application and then built it out, and it ultimately worked, and the model was good. I just found it a little bit more limiting in terms of long horizon.
Yeah, and maybe you're right. I don't know. Like I said this earlier as well, didn't I? About like not knowing exactly if they're set up equivalently, because I think there probably are settings in there that maybe it doesn't mean that that probably is a difference. There probably is a genuine difference in how they perform in that long horizon stuff. But yeah, I didn't spend enough time because we've been using Claude for so long. Like I was quickly trying to set things up and run them, and I didn't have time to interrogate exactly what all the different options are. But something that else, like, because going back to the kind of the quality and stuff, like the quality of Claude Code's code is obviously better because it seems like across the board that was the finding. But Codex was cheaper and quicker, and depending on what you value, like it comes down to what you're looking for. It's the same as choosing the model. It's like what do you need for the job at hand? Because for I don't think I have the tokens in front of me, but Claude Code used up a lot more tokens to produce that better code, which maybe you think, well, of course, because it's doing better work, but you'd have to get into the like, well, what's the meaningful difference in the quality, and how much do I want to pay for that difference? And the speed thing was another one. It's like depending on if it's something that you're just using. If it's a production ready application, you obviously want it to be as top notch as possible. But maybe for other things, if it's just for your own use, you don't want it to not work, but you might kind of prefer to go for something quicker and slightly less robust or less, perfect code. But you might favor using less tokens and having it quicker potentially.
Yeah, I think the token thing's funny because it's hard to know with Claude what tokens it's actually using, because they've done a lot of work with the cache and caching tokens. So it could be like 90% of them aren't actually something you're being charged for. But yeah, I know what you mean. And as well, it depends on the way you're using it. Claude could be slower, but you could step away and do something else for a long period of time because of this long horizon. So it could feel quicker. But then at the same time, if you're just kind of wanting to bash through things in the interface straight off with and just work it and sit in that session, then yeah, maybe your quicker models might be the way to go. Maybe Gemini 3.5 Flash is the way to go because of how quick it is. I found as well, and again, this could be a settings issue, but I did some research after it. I found it didn't tend to go into parallel agents.
No, I didn't see that at any point.
Apparently it is a capability, but Claude Code very much now, its recommended approach is to spin up sub-agent parallel agents with all their own context windows and everything like that. So it'll just sort of spin up 16 agents and work through different aspects of things. I didn't notice it doing that. And again, that feeds into the long horizon feeling I got, but I didn't notice it doing that a lot, even though it's potentially does. Maybe you have to force it into it a bit more.
Yeah, maybe.
Than with Claude.
Mm-hmm. The other thing I wanted to get to and I didn't was comparing Atlas against. Well, I mean, I know Atlas is a standalone browser, but comparing the in-app browser. So I was going to do some testing then, get them both to run through the different apps, but I ran out of time in the end. And also, I have to admit, I was slightly less interested in that.
I forgot it existed until you just said
There
it.
you go. Yeah. I used Atlas. I downloaded it when it came out, like the actual browser. And I just didn't like it because it was that thing, we've talked about this before. I don't know if we talked about this in the podcast or outside of it, but like you end up sitting there watching it do the thing and you think this is it's a weird concept. It's almost like that in between, there's like that in between technology before it becomes something. It's like they can't quite release it to people and have it go away and do things without them knowing. So they're like, oh, I know, here's the interim approach. We'll have it like play out the browser, the automation in the browser. But it's weird from a user point of view because you're just sitting there watching something happen in your browser. So it kind of feels a little like an in between tech. It's like the mini disc, it's like it feels like an in between technology.
I love the MIDI disc.
Same.
I mean that's changing for me now. But again, just like I just said, it because of the long horizon. I'm getting used to and trusting more that I can just sort of walk away, or just go. I tend to I built like a little notification service for myself last week where I can set it off on auto mode to do things, and I can be off doing something else, and it'll ping me and say like it wants some input or it's finished. And that could be 40 minutes of it just doing work in the background, or even longer if I like that example from earlier. I'm getting more and more used to that, and that's part of what was in that economic index thing, I suppose, that Claude released a little while ago, wasn't it? Like how much is augmenting and how much are you starting to just go like, there you go, you handle that.
Yeah, figure that out for me. Yeah. So going back to what I said about my slightly circular experience of trying to get a clean list of what they do and what they each do that the other one doesn't, I ended up giving up on that a little bit because it was getting farcical. But did you find anything that you felt like either was missing from the OpenAI set of tools that Anthropic has, or vice versa? Because I don't think I did. I didn't explore everything, but I didn't. I mean, apart from obviously, so there is like the Atlas browser, and that's a standalone thing, and Anthropic don't have a browser. But in terms of the kind of day-to-day functionality of what I would normally use, I didn't find anything missing. But equally, I didn't find anything in ChatGPT or Codex that I couldn't do already with Cowork or Claude Code.
Other than the pieces I just mentioned, like the little, and I don't know if it's muscle memory or what within Claude Code, where I know just to get this working or spin that up or up the work rate or whatever. Other than like those kind of things, the only one that stuck out to me is the code interface within the desktop app for Claude. Because I've recently, as part of that sort of long horizon stuff, I've very recently started using it to actually code, because it's got like a file browser of stuff in there now, and I've always been very much in Visual Studio using the CLI or the terminal. I've recently started using that, and that's got stuff in it like it shows me where my current token rate and burn down over 5 hours or whatever. It shows me the different merges I can do. It can go to auto mode, so I can get notifications on my phone and keep it going and moving as I found myself like on my phone being able to sort of reply and get it to carry on working. So that's the biggest missing piece for me was just that whole interface, that whole sort of nicer way of dealing with autonomous ways of working with code and the remote stuff.
Yeah, because I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure about that. That's actually it was something that came up, I think, in me trying to compare them, and then it was flagged as a possible hallucination. So I wasn't sure whether you could or couldn't do that remote stuff with ChatGPT.
I couldn't find anything obvious. I mean, because I would assume not, because it's part of it. It's built into the app, unless you can do it by Telegram. Because I know that Claude has the Telegram stuff up there. But I mean, I would say that probably in short order, OpenAI is going to come out with something, right? Because they hired the guy who built ClaudeBot. They've got to be thinking about how do we make this sort of always-on autonomous assistant, because otherwise I don't know why they bothered hiring him.
Yeah,
because that's most of what that stuff I just described is Claude's reaction to ClaudeBot a little bit.
yeah, it is. Yeah. Do you think it just kind of seems obvious now, but it's only just come to me? Like, they're so fixated on kind of trying to match each other. Do you think they're like, because it really felt to me like, as I said earlier, okay, when you really dig into it, you can kind of sense some of the differences, but like at a high level, they are just basically trying to match each other. And you would think, and it's easy to say this from the outside, but you'd think one of them would kind of say, no, we're going to just spin off a little bit and make sure we've got our own kind of unique offering. It probably is way easier to say that than to do it, but it just feels like they're playing this weird kind of childlike game of catch up. Like, oh, well, if you can do that, I can do that. And as opposed to them, I was kind of struck by how similar the product set is at least at the surface level.
Yeah, I didn't find that. I didn't feel that. I felt, especially on the Codex app, they were very different. That I didn't have what I needed, and maybe it's because we're doing different things on a day-to-day basis that's causing that gap. But my feeling is that Claude Code has maybe it's ChatGPT chasing up Claude Code now, because and so a lot of the similar things are appearing because they've seen that Claude Code is essentially positioned Anthropic as this behemoth in business and enterprise that they want to be.
Yeah, I guess I'm thinking level up. Like, you're right. Like, I'm not saying Claude Code and Codex are that similar, but like if you go in at the highest level and you go, right, there's an app, a desktop app that you can ask questions and you can connect it up to all your different, Slack and Excel and all these things. And then there's a coding agent. So if you only went that deep and you didn't really dig into like the differences in the two coding agents, like, I don't know, maybe there's no reason why they would be that different because they've come, like all the Anthropic people came from OpenAI. So maybe I shouldn't be expecting them to be kind of fundamentally different. And there's obviously ethical differences and safety differences and all the rest of it. But just the kind of product set it's quite similar. I don't know. Maybe I'm expecting something unrealistic that one of them would completely just go off and go, fine, look, we're not getting involved in this tit for tat anymore. We're just gonna. And maybe that's just what Anthropic are doing. Maybe
a little bit, but I don't know if maybe there's a set of. Probably they are copying each other. Almost certainly they are copying each other to a certain extent. Maybe there is just a natural cadence when they prioritize coding in the first instance to get towards like recursive self-improvement. Maybe that just naturally leads to sets of solutions and products that come out of it because that's what they're working on first, and like code, and then moving to like the co-work and Codex type stuff to do white collar work. Maybe none of them, maybe one of them don't want to stick their neck out too far. I mean, they're not gonna. I think it would be more a case of they're always going to be copying and chasing the same things, but does one of them make a bet somewhere that is different and see what sticks? Which I think Claude Code was in the first instance. They were the first movers there, really, weren't they? Many years ago.
And co-work,
yeah,
true, yeah. Well, maybe Mythos will just gobble up ChatGPT and chew it up and spit it out.
Maybe, or OpenAI come out with something. Maybe OpenAI will beat them to it. There's definitely some stuff's going to happen.
Well, it's going to be. No, you know what it's going to be. It's going to be the Microsoft models.
Yeah, that's the future.
That's it. So that's going to be our lengthy, deep 4-hour deep dive for the next episode. It's going to be the deep exploration of the Microsoft models.
If they release the models as Clippy, and like Clippy is then I'd probably buy into it.
I'm sold.
Yeah, but if not, then I'm not interested.
Clippy, the frontier AI model.
Yeah. Why didn't they should have called the models Clippy, because you had Claude, Clippy, that would have worked.
Yeah, I would, honestly. I'd be sold. So you said, okay, Great
You're
minds.
about to say what I'm about to say.
Go on. You do. You're the last question, guy. So go on.
Okay. So, yes, stick or twist. Would you stick where you are with Anthropic? Would you jump over to OpenAI, or is it like so much of a muchness? I'm just going to stay where I am because I can't be asked.
Well, I was probably more maybe impressed isn't the right word, but I probably had a better time with OpenAI than I thought I might. I don't know why, really. Just because I hadn't been using it doesn't mean I should have expected it to not do the same things that I'm currently using Claude for. But I just maybe felt like it was going to be a bit of a chore using it and trying to figure it out, and thinking, oh, this isn't Claude, I don't like this. But actually, for me, I know you had a lot of issues with that. For me, it was quite smooth, and then there were objective things that were better, like the deep research, for example. But ultimately, I'm not going to move away because Claude is really good also at what it does. Maybe the next time I have a deep research to do, I might go to ChatGPT, because that's something that I just do. That's never really linked to anything else in my kind of Claude ecosystem anyway. I'll just do that in a chat, and then I'll feed it into whatever I'm using it for. So that might be the only thing that I'd hop over to ChatGPT for, just because it was so much better. But for everything else, I think so both in terms of familiarity of using them and having them set up and having the memory and the history and the context, but also the at least on the surface, the ethical kind of leaning of Anthropic, or more ethical leaning of Anthropic, still makes me prefer them as a company. So I'm going to stick with Anthropic.
No, ultimately, like, the model was great. I didn't find it massively worse or better than like 4.8. They seemed very similar. Slightly different personality and sort of way of talking, but nothing that was blowing my mind. I had terrible time with the Codex app. I just couldn't get it to work, and ultimately it was missing pieces that I've come to get used to with Claude, and I still find Claude Code much better. Just generally my day-to-day work. I mean, most of my day-to-day work is coding based, so it feels like still the right model. Similarly, I might have what I might do is compare Gemini to ChatGPT from the deep research front, because I'm interested in, is Gemini even better than that? But yeah, I might start handing off some deep research tasks outside of Claude, because you don't know what you're missing till you see another alternate research, and maybe down the line there will be these sort of emerging focuses that turn out to be better with different models. And I think I have some people that have these sort of multi-agent, multi-frontier model stacks, because this is better at this, and this is better at this, and this is better at this, and you kind of route things through the different models in that way. But ultimately, I think the vibes and the responsibleness of that Anthropic claims to be still resonates. Claude Code still the beast, the best one for me. So yeah, I'm gonna stay where I am for now.
Yeah, until Clippy is on the market, that's where we're going to stick with Anthropic.
Yeah, and maybe we'll see where we're at. We'll do this again in a year's time. We'll see where we're at.
Yeah, well, a year seems like a long time away. Mythos will be making all our decisions for us by then.
Mythos, they better be good. They better be good, bloody Mythos. Otherwise, they're going to all right pillocks, aren't they?
It's hype. It's probably yeah. We'll see. Okay, let's leave it there. Until next time.
Yeah.
That's it for this week's episode of the Measure Pod. We hope you enjoyed it and picked up something useful along the way. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe on whatever platform you're listening on so you don't miss future episodes.
And if you're enjoying the show, we'd really appreciate it if you left us a quick review. It really helps more people discover the pod and keeps us motivated to bring back more. So thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.